All right, Paul, what's up? We're back here again on the PUDs Podcast. We're Joshless tonight, so this is you're out of the nest. You've been thrown out of the nest, and you're no, I
Right
guess
into the deep end, baby.
technically you're still in this. This cracked me up, but for those of you not watching on YouTube, you can put little informational boxes on like who you are in the StreamYard app, and Paul currently labeled himself as PUDs intern right now, so I got a good giggle out of that.
Gotta keep it light.
Hi, I'm Nick,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the PUDs Podcast. So, what have you been up to, Paul? What's going on? What's new?
Oh, geez. Busy weekend.
Yeah.
For sure. And a lot of time in the car, driving all over New England. It feels like.
Yeah,
What's
same.
yourself?
Same. I didn't drive all over New England, but spent a good. I mean, it was for a fun purpose, but drove up to visit my cousin and listener of the podcast, Sarah Beth, and her husband up at J Peak in Vermont. So, we had actually planned on going up there last year to join them for skiing, and norovirus ripped its way through my daughter's daycare. And unfortunately, we were casualties literally like days before. I think it was like we were supposed to leave on Thursday of like the week in March, almost the same around time span of March last year. And it was like Monday, and like we were both in denial. We're like, well, like Ryland's exploding literally. And then I was like, I feel kind of weird, and I'm like, nah, it's probably just like I probably ate some like old chicken salad or something like that. Like that's gonna be why I feel weird. And then by like my 50th trip to the bathroom, I was like, oh nope, I got noro, and I think it kind of hit Ash shortly thereafter. And needless to say, I don't think they would have been very happy if we showed up and gave them noro either. For anybody that's had noro, it's not a desirable thing to have. But we sort of made up on it. We got to catch up with my cousin Sarah Beth. Spent a lot of time going away with her like to beach houses and stuff when I was young with the family. So it was kind of good to like, I don't know, just like reconnect and hang out a bit after like not staying away together for quite a bit of time. We had stayed away in Vermont maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, and got to see sort of their world up there at J Peak. It is way up there. I think it was about a 4 hour 15-minute ride. You're not too far from the Canadian border. And thought one fun thing, they hit over 400 inches of snow for the year. This year they hit while we were up there, which is just obscene amounts of snow. But some really good skiing, especially Sunday. It was a little rough Saturday with the wind and sort of the recent rainstorm they had up there kind of made the trails a bit icy, but Sunday was good. And then we hit home. So spent a lot of time on the road, but spent a lot of time chilling and kind of hanging and doing some snowboarding and skiing. So it was a lot of fun. Nothing on the hiking docket though. I did bring all my gear up, but we did not break it out.
You had better things to do.
Yeah. I haven't hiked enough, so I figured I could take a break. I was like kind of pushing. I'm like, do we want to go? We could go out in snowshoes, and everybody's like, yeah, there's beer and music at different pubs, and it's like 3:00. So I think we're gonna do that instead.
Time for the pub crawl.
Yeah, which was perfectly fine. Yeah, we sort of did that around there. But where were your New England travels taking you this past weekend?
I was up in Vermont too on Friday, but it was back and forth. So my daughter goes to UVM, and so she it's her spring break this week. So I had to trek. I got up at the ass crack of dawn Friday morning, drove up there so I could actually work remote from Burlington. So I was online. I think I left home at 5. I think I was laptop fired up by like 8:30, and then we got on the road. I ducked off a little bit early, got on the road about 4:00, and then drove the 3+ hours home. So, that was Friday up in Vermont, and then Saturday was fun. Eric Todd Sweet's been going through a bit of a health scare, and he's doing great.
That's awesome. I heard about that through the socials. I know if you're following, you probably know. But I was like, holy shit, kind of deal. I was like, wow.
Yeah, he had the great he's been dealing with some heart troubles. Just like he getting out of the car and hitting the trails, like for the first maybe mile or so, he was complaining about heart issues. Heart pain, and He was, I can never remember the name of the cabin, but they were on the backside of Adams, and he happened to be hiking with a cardiac.
Grey Knob?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Cheers. Thank you.
Yep.
Happened to be hiking with a cardiac nurse of all things. And she's like, and he was telling her about his symptoms and what is going on. She's like, you need to go to the hospital now. And so, like she effectively saved his life. He went to, the long and short of it, and hope I'm not violating any HIPAA issues or anything along those lines. He had some severe blockage in his arteries.
Scary, man.
Whisked him right into taking care of that and addressing it. And so he had a probably a 3-4 week layoff. Okay. Before hitting the trails. So, we had reached out to him, and he was ready to get back at it. So Saturday drove up, met him at his house, and then myself, Deanna, and then two friends, Caleb, and I'm going to butcher her name, Gazul, went over and did Morgan and Percival. So it was kind of a, easing back into it for Eric, which was great. He did great. Fought through some anxieties about, what it was going to feel like.
Understandably. Yeah.
And we all kind of dealt with some different anxieties on that trail. Like, that's a fun loop.
Yes.
No one's ever done it. There's some kind of intricacies to it that were pretty cool.
Yeah, I was going to call it just Morgan and Percival on the 52 of the view list. They count as one, or maybe they count as two. God,
they are separate. In the
two
latest
separate
list, they are separate.
Okay, so you got to watch for some of those, and it's funny because what came to mind with this is because I had someone message me on Instagram once, or maybe I messaged them being like, "Oh, I did Welch Dickey. That's two more for the 52 of the view list," and I'm like, "No, technically that's one." And then she's like, "Well, Morgan and Percival are like." Or the double heads or one, like she's like, these are separate, and why is this one? And I'm like, I didn't make the list. Like, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you that if you submit your list and said that you did two on Morgan and Percival, you're going to be doing your math when you're at like 51. You're going to be like, oh, I only have 51. And they're around like, what is it, like the Squam Lake sort of? You drive past Squam Lakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so it's a 5.5 mile loop in, I think it's technically Holderness. The cool thing, it's very placid, easy to get up to. And then once you get just below the summit, all of a sudden you hit these ladders that you have to move your way up. So the tricky thing is you get about 2/3 the way up the ladders, and I'm going to butcher how to explain this, but there's the ladder that you're on, you've basically got to climb up over this rock face onto the next ladder.
Exactly.
And so it's a little tricky. Like Deanna struggled with it because no offense, Deanna, if you're listening, it's she's a little on the shorter side. So like it was harder for her to make that transition from one ladder to another. And so we got her through that, and then my anxiety set in going through that crawl space. Between the boulders. So it was optically, it looked a hell of a lot smaller than it actually was. So once I got into it and such, which wasn't without a little bit of a panic, to be honest, you work your way through, and then you've got to like turn left and climb out. And so it didn't sit well with me, like from like line of sight and such. So I had to put my big boy pants on and get through that. And then you just kind of scramble up to the top of Morgan. And like you said, you've got really nice views out to the Squam Lakes and such. So, and a pretty easy traverse over to Mount Percival. They're both like 2,200 feet. It was just a fun hike, and it was a great day for Eric to get out and kick the tires again. And and great to meet his friends, at the same time. So that was a super fun hike, and we got down from that, and it was still pretty early in the afternoon, and I had always wanted to check out Beatty Falls. It was something that I had heard about before, and then had seen some recent posts out in the Facebook groups and such. So we cruised over to those. They're in, I think technically in Sandwich.
Okay, yeah, like you have seen a lot of pictures of them, but never actually looked at where they actually resided. And I also feel like there's this air of like people are like, oh, like why are you posting pictures of these in the winter? But I'm like, I think you could Google it and find them pretty easily if you want to. It's not like they're a backwoods secret falls or something.
Yeah, it's basically you go to the same trailhead. I can't remember the trailhead off the top of my head. It begins with a W for Mount Israel.
Wentworth.
Yeah.
I think.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's right.
That's what I'm here for.
It's basically the same trailhead, and it's just an easy like 3/4 mile walk, and then all of a sudden you're staring at these falls, which are kind of half frozen, at this point. But it was, the pool below them. There was a couple thin spots, but you could make your way over to basically duck your head behind the waterfall and see this kind of cavernous area and such. So we hung out there for a little bit, and took a bunch of photos. I might have broken through the ice at one point and soaked my foot.
Uh-oh.
But it was what it was, and we cruised back, had dinner at the Woodstock Brewery. Met Gingerbeard Keene, Mike Keene, for the first time. So that was he had dinner with us, met us there. So it was cool. Got to meet him for the first time, which was really kind of cool thing is he actually lives in the town that my mom lives in. So just kind of some small world type stuff.
That's funny.
And that was a wrap for that day. Drove back to Massachusetts because I needed to head. Sunday was the 1 year anniversary of my dad's passing. So there was a mass being said for my dad, and we had lunch planned with all the family members that could make it. So, I drove up to Milford, New Hampshire. We did the family thing, mass and mass lunch, and then went to the cemetery to visit my dad and such. So it was, for me, it was like, that was a bit of a healing moment and such. And, but I was ready to get back north. And, so I left from there and headed back. I'd gotten a motel room in Bartlett. I got up there about 4:30, probably 4:30 or so, overcast, it was overcast. It was starting to flurry a bit. Yep. I'm like, you know what, I'm going to grab Willard. And which I had never done before.
You actually hadn't gotten up Willard before, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, never done it before.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a fun trail. And at that point in the afternoon, there was a couple of rock climbers coming down. But I saw a couple faces, and then I got out to the ledge there, and it was all socked in. It was snowing and such. But it was. I was able to spend a little time in thought and, thinking about my dad a bit more, and cruise down and I didn't want to do anything too big. One, because, this was before clocks changed. So, not necessarily pushing daylight, but I had bigger things planned for Monday. So I went back to the motel and just kind of settled in for the night. And, my plan on Monday was to get the twins. Buddy Christian Hikes the Whites had done the twins and Galehead on Sunday, gave me a real favorable trail report. Okay. If you remember, Christian and I had attempted these a couple of weeks ago when he took a bit of a fall. So he got his redemption on Sunday. I was hoping to get mine on Monday. There was, you and I were chatting. There was snow that came in that, the night before Sunday night. And even on my drive there Monday morning, there was still snow coming down and such. So I'm like, the forecast said maybe an inch or two. And, that certainly proved to be the case down low, but it was a different story up top.
Yeah.
I, did the whole thing, parked at Seven Doors Motel again, I think for like the third out of the last 4 weekends.
They're making some money off you and Christian this winter.
They are, man. They are. Hopefully I can pay my daughter's tuition, this fall. So
spend it all at Seven Dwarfs.
Yeah. So, I at least did the North Twin Trail that kept to the left bank, I guess you will, of the Little River, as opposed to doing what we did the last time with the 3 river crossings and such. And, it's, I think, to where you get to the first and only river crossing, it's like 3.4 miles from the Seven Dwarfs. So it's so that was all familiar territory. The river was still pretty well frozen, but you're starting to see points where it's like, all right, this doesn't have too much longer, especially with this week's forecast. I got across the river again. It was kind of like, an inch, 2 inches, fresh powder. So no big deal. But, once I started to hit the elevation, the 1 to 2 turned into 2 to 4. Really there was like no sign. You could kind of still make out the faint outline of the monorail. But it was like, as I kept getting further north on the mountain, it just was like disappearing. There was no signs that anyone was there the day before.
Did it start fading up before you started climbing pretty good? Or
yeah, definitely. It actually, like, even even probably the second, I crossed the river really over to that side. It was like, there was no footprints, there was no snowshoe prints, anything along those lines. So, Monday was a cold day. It was forecasted to be just below 0, I think, with wind chill. And, I kept making my way up. Christian had given me some good intel about, it was slippery in spots. So he had gone up in microspikes. I think the 2 guys that he was with also did microspikes. Christian switched to shoes just below the summit where it was starting to get slippery. And I got up there, and, the now 2 to 4 was really like 6 to 8 inches. I mean, there was still a shitload of snow up on the Twins. The trail markers were like right at the snow level.
I'll have to share some of those pictures. I mean, even I think I don't know if it was you or if it was someone else, but like posting pictures of like some of the signs up there, and like you can tell people have been like unburying the signs. Like there's got to be 6 or 7 feet of snowpack up there. Gonna be an interesting spring with how it's shaping up. I mean, I think even with warming temps, there's gonna be snow up in some of those areas like well into June, I think, this year.
Yeah, it's nuts, and I'm sitting there, and again, my plan was north and south. Wanted to get those to get up to 38. And
did you have any views at all off North Twin, or was it just
0?
Just totally
Absolutely,
socked? Okay,
absolutely, completely socked in. And I was really reaching the end of my comfort level. I didn't see another soul. I got up above tree line. It's like, or just below tree line. And, I just couldn't, I kept losing the trail. And, but the nice thing was, it was, there's definitely the packed monorail. So like losing the trail was just like, I would take a step off the wrong direction, sink, up to my knee, if not further, get back on the monorail, and then take a step, and so I had to keep doing this for like,
you're like,
for a little bit.
Exhausting.
Yeah, it gets tiring for sure. And then when I got above, above tree line, it was starting to freezing rain, and I couldn't see it. There was a couple areas that were a bit windswept, and, just walking 10 feet, I kept turning around just to make sure I kind of had like a visual, like, all right, where do I got to get back to? And, there was points where I couldn't even see my footprints. So it was just like, it was a little unsettling. Again, I was solo, didn't see a soul. It's like freezing rain, below 0 with wind chill. I like grabbed north and turned right around.
I can't say I blame you. There's something too about when it's foggy like that. Like I feel like it just kind of messes with your mood, where it's weird, and especially when you haven't seen anybody all day. Like, don't blame you in the least. It's funny. I was trying to think too when you're losing trail, but I do remember there is that area of like almost birch glades before you start to hit. Cause like I know once you get towards like you hit that ledge off of North Twin, that's like sort of on your left, like after it opens up, like there's a pretty well defined route through those trees. But like I remember those glades you go up through on the way, I could definitely see how that would be interesting going up, because it's not a super, if you're there in the summer, you probably can sort of find the washed out like section where the trail kind of fault line is. But yeah, I can definitely see how that could be interesting.
It just like the whole thing visually did not it didn't sit well, and I was like, I have no idea if anyone is coming up behind me, and which as it turned out, I reversed course the 5+ miles back, 5.7 I think the whole trip was 11.4. I didn't see a soul. The only footprints I saw were mine going up. And I got back to Seven Dwarfs. I was still the only car in the lot, and called it a day, and jumped in the car, went to Schilling and Littleton, had a pizza and a beer, and drove home. So it was a good 3 days of hiking. I think I did like a little more than 21 miles, across the three, and definitely got some. I think it was about 10 hours of hiking, and I don't know, 5,500 ish feet of gain. So it was it was definitely a good weekend.
Cool. I'm glad you got. So is that 37 for you got now, or 36?
Yeah, 37. Crossed a few 52 of the views off the list too. Awesome. I think depending on which version of the list you're working from, I think I'm around 19 on that. So it's we're getting there.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm glad you were carrying the hiking torch for us this weekend while I was snowboarding. So I did.
That was the extra weight in my pack.
Yeah. That's what that was. I did. It was funny. I was thinking I've been, knock on wood, like with injuries or anything this winter, I've been pretty good. But I feel like too with me with snowboarding, it's always like I tend not to get hurt myself doing stupid stuff, but there was a kid that cut out in front of me that must have been 6 or 7, and I like stopped short and like basically hit some ice right in front of him and just slammed right on my left butt cheek. So I was thinking, I was saying to Ash, I'm like, it seems ironic that the most hurt I got this year, like doing the East Ostial, is all these things that I just got hurt like literally on a relatively flat section at a ski resort. But hey, it could be worse. But yeah, I got back and she's like, "Why are you sitting weird?" I'm like, "Because I think my butt is like swollen right now." Just like slammed it. Cool, man. Well, ready to get into the next music moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Let her rip.
All right. Okay, so for tonight's next music moment, I think a lot of people know. Once I find an artist I like, I sort of tend to keep digging through them. So I've been riding the Hazel English train. So checked out her newest album, newest being out in 2021. So I guess it's technically not that new at this point, but it's called Real Life. So some of my favorite songs off it are 9 Stories, Jessie, who actually is with the band Daywave, that she's good friends with, and the song Summer Nights is good. I think the album as a whole is decent. I'd say it admittedly, it's not a super innovative album, I think, compared to at least her first 2 EPs like I was listening to. There's nothing that blows you away here, but it's like she more refined her sound a little bit stylistically. I think it's a good listen, front to back. I believe I may or may not have played this like 3 times between driving up and back from Vermont, and I think by the 3rd time Ash is like, "Okay, like can we I just tend to get hooked on." I'm like, I'm just kind of want to keep listening to this and breaking this thing down, but I think Ash had to get control of my music for a bit and sort of switch up off the Hazel English, because I think I listened to her first double EP album and then her other 2 albums like basically twice in like 2 or 3 days. So sorry, Ash, for subjecting you to that, but I'm just a fan. So the album Real Life by Hazel English, check it out. And do we have any? First of all, I had a question. Did you come up with any sort of catchy little moniker sort of thing?
I think it was.
Did it not feel right?
You know what? It was too obvious. It was too obvious.
What? I
think we were looking for like something more challenging.
Okay.
So like a lot of my friends call me Pauly. So
okay.
I think it should just be Pauly's Playlist.
There you go. Very easy. Very easy.
I think we were trying to like get too creative.
I was like Paul's percussive something, or I'm like, what words? Like
I was like
picado.
Paul's pumps.
yeah. Paul's pumping jams. So what do we got for Paulie's playlist?
Yeah, I'm not someone. I'm gonna have something better next week.
Okay.
I'm not someone who gets lost in the nostalgia too much. To be honest, but with again, and sorry to beat this drum too much, but the anniversary of my dad's passing.
It's all good, man. It's fresh. It's fresh. I've been there.
Yeah. So my dad's favorite two artists were Neil Diamond and Jim Croce. And so I found myself like, when I was driving up after the mass and celebration with my family, kind of rocking out to a lot of Neil Diamond. And I don't think you can really rock out to Jim Croce, but
you can. I'm sure if you tried hard enough, you could do something. I'm just trying to imagine like someone really, really going at it, like in their car, like you just like you're at a stoplight and somebody's just like jamming to Jim Croce. Like, whoa, he's doing it.
Man, what is that guy listening to?
Yeah,
Man, it is Time in a Bottle or Operator. That'd be a pretty funny moment. So so I ended up just like throwing on some great Neil Diamond classics and some Jim Croce classics on the drive up on Sunday back north. So yeah, I'll get something a little more modern, a little more hip next week.
No pressure. That's Neil Diamond and Jim Croce are timeless. So check them out, Neil Diamond and Jim Croce. If you're not familiar, which if you're much younger than I am, you probably aren't familiar. I feel like I'm on like that cusp of having like parents and people that know about that are aunts and uncles. So check them out. I think definitely worth a listen.
Yeah, 100%.
So you ready to get into our guest tonight? I'm pretty stoked to have them on. We got another Notch Hostile connection, I think.
Yeah. There's there's a lot to talk about. This could be like a 4-hour segment.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm gonna have to control myself. Just give me a weird look if I keep going on too much about hiking and maps and such.
I try to kick you under the table, but I don't know if my leg can reach Rehoboth.
Quite the reach. All right, let's get into it. All right, so super excited to welcome Lyla Harrod to the podcast tonight.
Hey, what's up, y'all?
And we got Paul sitting in here too with us. So Paul's getting his feet wet. He's kind of a little bit newer to the PUDs podcast, but I believe he was sort of trial by fire with Josh a couple weeks. So I think he's ready to roll. I know he did his research. It admittedly, I think more than even I did when he was showing me his notes. So he's covered. I'm going to rely on him. If we get in a dead zone tonight, blame Paul because he's got a lot of directions that we can go in. But
I believe in you, Paul.
Yeah, he's got it.
I appreciate that,
so this is his first formal interview.
Support I can get.
But yeah, so Lyla, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. My name's Lyla Harrod. I use she, her pronouns. I'm 37 years old for a couple more weeks. I'm holding on to those. And my trail name is Sugar because I have just a terrible diet, honestly, on and off trail for the most part. But I did my first. So I'm a hiker. I'm a long distance hiker. I live in New Hampshire, live and work in New Hampshire. My first long distance hike was the Appalachian Trail in 2021. About 6 weeks into that, I was just I knew that through hiking was the thing for me. And I decided to sort of make, fully invest and do a full send, make through hiking, find a way to make it my life and to try to make it sustainable. And so I just kept on hiking from there. I hiked the Arizona Trail later that year and also set a fastest known time on the Bay Circuit Trail, which is outside Boston. And yeah, I mean, I could do a full rundown of all the trails and everything, but the long and short of it is that I've hiked 13,000 miles on long distance trails and routes, one of which I've created myself called the Divide to Crest route last year. And that is 13,000 miles since March of 2021. So just
Holy
about 4
moly.
years.
It's a lot of mileage. It's a lot of mileage.
That's a lot of ultras.
Yes.
That's
yes.
that's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot of shoes I wore through. That's for sure.
Yeah, so I guess to start, maybe we can just start at the beginning, sort of. I guess what got you into hiking? Like, obviously, you have a huge passion for it. If you've hiked 13,000 miles in the past four-ish years at this point,
Yeah, I'm pretty into it.
so I guess what lit that fire? Like, what got you started?
Yeah, I mean, I was never really, I wasn't in a hiking family growing up. Wasn't something that I had much experience with. Um, uh, I really got into hiking and backpacking after college. I moved out to Seattle, and I had a friend out there who was into hiking out in the Cascades and the Olympics. And he sort of lent me some gear, showed me the ropes, told me how to like do a bear hang, all this sort of like nuts and bolts that can, get you out backpacking safely and enjoying the outdoors. And I mean, if you're gonna fall in love with backpacking, the Northern Cascades in Washington are like quite the place to do it, especially hiking through like August and wildflower and berry season. So yeah, when I ended up moving back a couple of years later, I moved back to the East Coast, and I just knew that I wanted to like deepen that skill set and that like passion and I did that in the White Mountains. And so yeah, I was like a backpacker for a long time after that, weekend warrior type. Something about me, I've been sober for a little over 7 years from drugs and alcohol. Thank you. But while I was like drinking and using, the idea of doing these like longer trips or really sort of pushing myself in the outdoors wasn't really on the table for me. I was sort of like tethered to the bottle in a pretty it's like literal handcuffs. If you can't go further than the liquor that you can carry in your backpack, you're only going to be able to spend so much time in the outdoors any given time. So, and a lot of your time and resources goes into literally just being at a bar or working to pay for the bar. So, I didn't really get to express my love of the outdoors in the way that I wanted to throughout most of my 20s. So when I then got sober in 2017 and began my gender transition in 2018, I found that I had a lot more resources and capacity to invest in the outdoors and literal time, like time not spent at a bar is time that I could be hiking or in the outdoors. So I ended up sort of replacing all that time. A lot of it, I replaced it with the outdoors, with hiking. And that started out on the Bay Circuit Trail, which are you guys familiar with the Bay Circuit Trail?
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. I've heard.
Is that South Shore?
It starts on the South Shore in Kingston, and it runs up to Plum Island and Newburyport. Yeah, it's like a 230-mile trail that goes along the Greenbelt outside the Boston metropolitan area. I'm sure that you've driven past it before and not even noticed it. And I sort of stumbled upon it. I was in Hamilton, Wenham, when I stumbled upon it. And sort of like saw like a trail marker and Googled it. And I was like, what? There's a long distance trail right here in Boston.
That's kind of mind-blowing. I didn't know. Like I've heard, so the Green Belt, is that like sort of the western edge of Boston? Like it kind of just circles the western side
it goes. It sort of makes a little like bell around the outside of Boston. There is no true like green belt in the way that they had originally envisioned it. Just because city development beat out the concept for a green belt. But there is still a lot of green area out there. And the Bay Circuit Trail is a beautiful trail. If y'all are hikers in Boston, go just Google it, look at the map. You're probably close to it. Close to it, way closer than you think. And you could be hiking on a long
I wonder if I've been
trail.
in sections of it. Yeah. I wonder
you
if I've
probably
been in
have.
sections of it, like over in Manchester by the Sea and
it doesn't go through Manchester specifically,
Salem?
but yeah,
like Salem?
It goes up through like Georgetown, Boxford, Andover. It goes through downtown Lowell. It runs along the Merrimack River.
Wow.
There's some beautiful sections. I love it. I'm hoping to hike the Bay Circuit Trail again this year. I love it, and I love outside Boston. That's where I grew up. So it's a beautiful trail. You should check it out. But God, what was I actually talking about? Oh, about how I.
It was one of the things. I mean, you got so much material to dig through. So I was having a little field day the last few days, kind of prepping for tonight. So definitely like hit on your sobriety. I would love to know, was there was there a tipping point that was really kind of that pivotal moment where you said, enough's enough. This is the change I got to make, and the change I got to make for the better to really fulfill who you wanted to be as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was able to hold a job, but just barely. I was certainly not thriving, I wasn't happy. I had a lot of personal issues. I ended up getting arrested. And, it's surprising because you'd think that that wasn't even the first time I had been arrested. I had been arrested in years prior, throughout my life, that I had faced consequences in the past. And, it didn't make me stop. I sort of looked right past it, but for whatever reason, I got really, really lucky this time, and something, like a switch sort of flipped in me, and I just I had the actual willingness to change, and I had something that I just consider it sort of like a miracle, and something I got really, really lucky with. And I got into a program of sobriety, and built a big sobriety community, and it's been a big part of my life ever since. So certainly without the recovery community in the Boston area, I wouldn't be where I am today, for sure.
That's great.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. I know that's gonna be really tough. So that's amazing that you sort of overcome that and kind of get out of that habit, and sort of recognize the fact that obviously you've gone on to do much more amazing things than sitting in a bar or something like that, and traveling hiking literally all over the United States, outside Boston, all these other cool places, and getting to share those adventures with others and kind of inspire others. So that's super super awesome. Did you want to talk about too, maybe the gender transition a little bit too, and how I'm imagining part of the sort of addictions and stuff might have been linked to that, but how that all, because it seems like that sort of flew in, kind of fed into the hiking a little bit, and it seems it's really interesting. I've read a bit of it. Admittedly, I've read some of your blogs and stuff like that, but would you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Those two things are they feel intrinsically linked to me. My sobriety and my gender transition. When one couldn't happen without the other. My happiness was always going to be hampered if you're not able to be authentic. If you feel like you're sort of living a lie in a way, are you ever going to really feel happiness? Do you ever going to feel fully at home and in your body and in your life? Probably not. So by getting physically sober, that was basically allowed me to sort of clear out my mind. And I had only become cognizant, or said to myself, I'm transgender a couple of years prior to that, but I didn't really have the ability to do anything about it at the time. It's just something that I sort of knew. But yeah, once I got sober, I felt like I was able to step into myself, and I now had this newfound strength and community of support, and an ability to be honest with myself in a way that I hadn't in the past. So yeah, that ability to tap into my own authenticity is what allows me to not only go through my gender transition, but then to sort of literally put down this also, wonderful life that I had built for myself. I was working in youth development for a long time. And that's a career that meant a lot to me. But at the end of the day, I didn't want to spend time behind a desk anymore. I wanted to get outside. So I decided to honor that. And to, if you're already going to go through the whole thing of getting sober and blowing your life up in that way, and then going through a gender transition and blowing your life up that way, then what is to stop me from doing exactly what I want to do with my precious life,
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure it took a lot of courage. My older brother is gay, and I grew up in a very strict Catholic household, and I'm very traditional in the roles. My parents were very, very devout Catholics, and my brother did what a lot of people in the Catholic Church did. He went and initially was going to hide in the priesthood. And, he gave a gift to himself for his 30th birthday, and, coming out, declaring his sexuality. And I can't remember the exact term you said, but blow it up. Like he blew it up. Certainly with my family, and it was hard for some of my family. Still, it was hard for my parents for a long time. So, but I truly admire him and his courage, and imagine that you went through a lot of the same challenges. So, I certainly applaud you for it. I'm sure it took a lot of courage to do what you did, and as my brother did as well. And, you certainly put the foot on the gas and really, really taken that transformation that you made, as an individual. It's been, I've been, like I said, I've immersed myself in what you've been up to. For the last 2 days, I've been immersing myself, in preparation for this discussion. I'm like, damn, she is. She's really been up to a lot of great things. So I'm eager to. I know Nick's getting ready to get on the PCT, but
that aside,
things to pick through.
besides the hiking though, but like even to touch on with Paul, it's the amount of courage is amazing. And like I said, I'm failing to come up with another word other than inspirational, but I think it's also really cool how open you are about all this. Like even with us, like I try not to be too forward with anything and be polite, but I figured you'd be pretty open with everything, and it's just inspirational, like I said, to hear this. And I think it'll just hearing your story, reading your story, and how you share it online, hiking aside, is awesome. Like I'm sure there's a lot of other people that you probably affected that you don't even know. And it's amazing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I can tell you maybe why I decided to do that, why I decided to be sort of like public with my story and with my experience, and like why I can talk so openly about my sobriety, right? Like all these experiences, like in the preparation for me, in the preparation to the Appalachian Trail, my through hike of the Appalachian Trail in 2021, I was doing research, as we all have at some point, right? Like about what it's like on trail and what people's experiences are. And I had tried to look into what the experience of trans people on trail was. If there's anyone who had done it prior to me, who maybe had some like tips or some like, here's things to look out for, or here were the major challenges, or here's were some of the unexpected positives I found. All that information, all that experience I wish I could tap into. I was Googling, transgender through hikers, Appalachian Trail, like any combination of that type of keywords. And I was getting like no results. There really wasn't. And that was in 2021 that I was doing those Google searches, guys. So we're not talking about ancient history here.
Not 1980 or something like that.
No,
or Red Roads.
A few years ago, post-pandemic, after the pandemic had started in 2020. So, modern times. And I was just sort of like flabbergasted. I had just figured I was Googling it wrong. I had, pulling up Firefox to see if Firefox had something different, because of what do I know? But yeah, the content wasn't there. And what that made me feel was that I felt like a little bit alone. Like it's a little bit nerve-wracking to feel like, oh my gosh, like have other trans people done this type of thing before? Like, am I going out on a limb doing something that's more dangerous than I should be doing? I think on some level, I could probably, I intuited, I'm sure that other people have done it before, but I could also understand why people wouldn't want to be public with their story because of the fear of backlash, because of the fear of these negative consequences that we see in the media day after day. But I think it's valuable to have those set of experiences in the ether, to have them in the community, and to have at least a person that when people Google, trans through hiker AT, that someone's name comes up, that some response comes up, that some experience comes up. And Google the same thing today, and there'll be a few different hikers that come up. And that's such a beautiful thing. Like just in the last few years, that's starting to happen now. And I want it to be like an accessible resource. And if you're going to be accessible, you have to be accessible. You have to actually be accessible. Like if somebody DMs me online, if it's a queer or trans person, and they want to talk about what their experience is going to be like, I'm going to respond to you personally. If you want to do a phone call with me, that's going to happen. That's the type of accessible that I strive to be. And that's why I ended up starting the queer and trans through hiker mentoring program as well. Is just I want there to be, if there's no resources online and people don't feel comfortable talking about these things online, I'll pick up a phone, I'll do a video chat, I'll do whatever you want, like just so you can feel like you have somebody and you're not alone as you head into what can be a very like scary leap.
Yeah, that's so fantastic. And it's funny too. I don't think it's ever really, not that we've definitely had people on our podcast who have done the AT or other long distance trails. But I think Trisha might have been to refer back to sort of her episode. I know she's also happens to be your roommate, but I think she was one of the first ones that sort of brought up, oh, like when we were like, oh, what was sort of the most difficult part of the AT? And she brought up, oh, like sort of the social aspect of it, which I'm sure isn't necessarily something that comes to everybody's mind. Like I know if I was thinking of hiking the AT, like the social dynamic between people you meet on the trail and yourself and maybe friends that you're bringing with you, or whether it's a spouse or girlfriend, boyfriend, like whatever, like that's not something I necessarily would put front to mind. And it does make sense because it's like, hey, you're not out there alone hiking the AT. Like there's many other people that go for it for the season. There's a huge community around it and everything else. So you're far from free of interacting with other people, even though you are basically in the woods and hiking along these mountain ranges and along the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's especially with the Appalachian Trail, right? Like that's such a hyper social trail. You're gonna see 40 people a day. You know what I mean? Like, especially for the earlier on in the trail, right? Like it is a wilderness experience in some ways, especially depending on when you start or when you finish. But yeah, you're going to run into people out here. It's the East Coast. Yeah, so that for sure is like one of the challenges, but also as I know she agrees, like that is like a main strength of the Appalachian Trail too, is that the community and the culture around it are the thing that keep drawing people to it. It's why she and I both live on the Appalachian Trail. It's why that's like, like our friends and our lives in pretty big ways revolve around the Appalachian Trail community. And it's a really like special thing that's very, very hard to find anywhere else.
That's great. You had mentioned just briefly about mentoring other queer and trans individuals. Is that the Trail QT's work? Is that what you're referencing?
Yeah.
You mind just dropping some knowledge on that?
Sure. Yeah. That's just a program that I came up with 2 years ago now. I had a lot of people message me directly to ask questions about, like, they were telling me they had thru hikes coming up, or they're telling me about the struggle that they had with like getting the proper gear, just like any number of questions that people would have that are general to thru hiking, but also specific to being a queer and or trans thru hiker. So with my background in youth development, things like mentoring programs like are sort of second nature to me. So that's sort of how my mind like framed the work around it, right? Was, well, if we already have this need, like there's an identified need in the community, can I put myself out there to offer this sort of like basically service, like for free, to mentor first time queer and trans thru hikers. In addition to that, I wanted to provide like gear to basically reduce socioeconomic barriers to access for those hikers as well. I mean, the truth is, like, that's all something that I ended up doing just on my lonesome the first year. So it's a full-time job, basically. And then the second year, just because of the interest, a couple of my friends joined me to also be mentors for the program. So last year we had 3 mentors. The 3 of us this year are in a much different situation than we were last year, project-wise, financially, everything. So we've gone a bit more sort of like informal with the mentoring this year, where we're doing it mostly sort of like word of mouth basis. So we didn't do like the full application process this year. I think we'll get back to something more formal. It really just depends on where, everyone's doing everything unpaid and everything. And, we all have our own lives and we're all, struggling under capitalism out here. It's, that we have to make concessions where we can, but we're all still in touch with hikers who are going to be hiking this year. And I think at this point, mentoring is just something that we're all pretty set on doing whenever we have the opportunity to. So that's what it looks like right now.
That's great.
Cool. That's great. So I did want to talk about your most recent impressive project was this whole Crest to Divide, or Divide to Crest rather, right? Was what you coined the project. So
Yeah.
have so many questions about this. Like, where did this idea? I guess how did it start? Like, what even got you to want to do this connection? Had never been done before? To do this super long distance hike across the West.
Okay.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
when I started through hiking, okay, 2020, remember the very, very like first days of the pandemic, things were wild. I feel like, I don't know about y'all, but I was like locked in my home. Time like didn't exist for a while. And I was staying up weird hours, all this
Yeah,
sort of stuff.
well
And
said.
I started watching YouTube hiking documentaries. I was stuck in a room and I wanted to picture myself out in these mountains hiking long distance trails. So I started watching a bunch of documentaries about various trails, like not just the AT, CDT, PCT. And I also had seen one about the Hayduke as well, the Hayduke route. So I was really drawn to the CDT and the Hayduke as two trails that I felt like that those will be like, I'm not ready to do these two trails yet. Like that's not where my experience level is yet, but that's where I want to be. Those were really calling to me.
Sorry,
So over the next,
the Hayduke, I'm not familiar with
the Hayduke route.
the
Yeah.
Hayduke.
Yeah.
The Hayduke. Okay. So what
So
is that?
it's not like a formal trail. It's a route. But there's a million different ways to do it, but it spans generally about 800 miles, goes through a lot of the main national parks in the southern Utah, northern Arizona corridor there. It's one of the most challenging routes, like sort of more popular long distance routes, I would say. And when I say popular, I think like 6 or 7 people did it my season. So it's
So
very uncommon.
is that a route that's a portion of that long trail because I know like some of them split off different is it its own long distance trail? I guess is what
So,
I was
so the
confused about.
Hayduke is its own thing. It's not a trail. There's no
Okay.
there's like markers or something like on
Okay.
the Appalachian Trail. There's like a narrative that you can look up if you look up the Hayduke route. There's a book created by this person, Mike Coronella. I forget the other person who helped him with it. But that was written back in 1998. So it's like essentially a narrative format for getting through the desert in the backcountry. Mike Coronella is I was told he's still a guide out in Moab, but he just he knows the backcountry out there like the back of his hand and always has. So he wanted to take this sort of like backcountry experience that he curated based on not what was easiest or what was most the most efficient ways to do something, but just sort of like to go and see the places in the way that he wanted to show it to people, like using his own footpath.
Okay.
So it's a really beautiful concept for a trail. And like, I fell in love with that whole concept, right? Of like route creators it is a very creative process, right? Where you're sort of like showing people the world through your eyes and drawing people to the places and the things that are most important to you in the way that you want them to see them. And I don't know, it's like, it's a beautiful thing. And it reminds me, it's sort of like art to me. So I really fell in love with that route and the idea of like him creating a route. I don't think that I'm like him. I don't think that I'm like many of the people who I know who are like fantastic, like the best route creators in the country and then in the world. I don't think that I'm like them, but I did want to create my own experience. After I had finished, so I'm going to fast forward now. So back to sort of, we'll do 2023, the winter of 2023, after I had finished the CDT. So at that point, I had done the CDT and the Hayduke, which, as I mentioned, were the two sort of like trails that I was most excited for. And I felt like were my sort of like reaches when I started back in 2021. So having sort of like achieved those, quote unquote goals that I was hoping for, it's sort of like, well, if that was what I've been working for these past few years, what do I want to do now? What does my life look like now? What excites me now as a completely different person than I was back then when I set those goals? So I decided that I wanted to, give myself a new challenge to try to find my way through terrain that people maybe hadn't before, or to find a way through in a new way, or to connect routes and trails that were pre-existing to create and curate an experience of my very own. And I was looking at the trails that looking back at some of the trails that I'd already done, like the Hayduke, the Arizona Trail, the CDT, the PCT. And then I was looking at some trails and routes that I was very interested in doing, primarily the Mogollon Rim Trail, which runs east to west across northern Arizona, and the Oregon Desert Trail, which runs relatively east to west across Oregon. Those were two sort of like gems that I really wanted to make sure I touched along the route. And I just started I got on Gaia and I just started vaguely connecting these massive swaths of land essentially. And, I became you're mile by mile dragging through these Gaia maps to try to create some way that you believe, based on what you can see on a map, which is not reality when you get on the ground, that you believe might be physically passable, that you could walk. And that being able to walk something doesn't just mean can you, not run into a wall. It also means, do you have access to enough food and water to sustain yourself during the interim there, each section. That I started connecting it on Gaia that fall, and it just it's like a brain worm. Once it got in my mind, I had to do it, I had to see it. I had to see all these places that I was drawing on a map. And so that's what got me out there. And then, I don't know. How's that?
That's
So
awesome.
you had, sorry, Nick. You had stitched together all of these known trails, right? But I think if I remember right, there was about 600 miles that were unaccounted for completely. That this is Lyla's trail, right? This is
exactly
this is what you're stitching together to kind of fill in some gaps and such.
Yes,
fascinated to hear about that, and I'm also I was really intrigued by the Basin and Range section of your hike.
Yeah, me too.
That Nevada area is it's like another planet, and the government wants you to believe it's another planet too. So.
Truly, you're so right. I think that's a super fair way to put it. Okay, so first I'll just address the 600 miles part. The route connectors that I created, those were a mix of practical and trying to make it enjoyable for myself. Out of all, people talk about trails like the CDT and all the road miles, or Florida Trail and all the road miles and everything. I had my fair share of road miles on my massive, uncharted route or whatever. But most of the road miles were on dirt roads and stuff like that, which, especially if you're out in the middle of nowhere, that might as well be a trail. You know what I mean? Roadwalks are not this big out west. Out west, roadwalks aren't this big, scary thing that people feel like they are on the East Coast. I love a good road walk, on some dirt road or whatever. It can be nice to not have to watch where you put every single foot for a while, So sometimes I would use forest road connectors, old Jeep roads, things like that. Then a lot of times it's just sort of bushwhacking across plains or across desert or, sagebrush, things like that. And then a lot of it is trying to find ways to access water. Think, for example, if you're hiking the Appalachian Trail, you have access to the Far Out Guide, right? Where each water hole is listed or each water source is listed. And you're probably going to have notes about when it was most recently accessed and what the water quality looks like. Okay. So do you have that when you're walking through the middle of Nevada? No, absolutely not. Because nobody walks out there. It's not a place that people walk. They think you're a lunatic if you are walking.
Can you see anything on Gaia as far as rivers and okay?
Yes. So that's the challenge, right? Is you'll see on Gaia, it's not really rivers as much, but it's mostly springs. But there's a big difference between seasonal and perennial springs, between streams that are snow melts and streams that are spring fed, right? There's a million different types of water sources, and you aren't able to glean all that information strictly from a Gaia map. Right. So a lot of times it'll say that there's a spring there, but if I'm hiking through something in June or July in a basin where it's 105 degrees, there ain't going to be no spring there. I don't care how much it's on the map or how well it's marked on the map. So you have to also anticipate that based on the topography of what you're looking at, whether or not you think there's a reasonable chance that there is even going to be water there when you get there. A lot of times you don't really end up counting on it. I count on things though. I count on those thick blue lines and, like things like that, like on maps, like give me a river any day or like a well-marked stream or something at least. But short of that, like sometimes you get lucky and run into like some unmarked cattle trough, things like that. That'd be really lucky. That'd be nice. There's a bunch of like rain guzzlers, which are essentially rain catchers, that ranchers and wildlife maintainers use, like BLM management use to like encourage like elk and other things that like people would want to hunt to hang around in the area. So yeah, you got to get pretty scrappy. And my job for myself while I was out there was not only to like sort of trace which water sources ended up being legitimate or not for the time period that I was going through, and also like did I come across like rancher troughs, things like that I would be able to access.
So what were you using? What was your choice of filtration out there? Not to stop.
Sawyer squeeze. Yeah. I use the Sawyer squeeze. I always use it. It's what I trust. I would say that this is the first trail. It might have been nice on the Hayduke for a while too, but I didn't think to do it back then. But this is the first trail that I carried 2 Sawyers because like some of the, like, I can't tell you like how awful the water quality was. You guys might have come across a story or two about some awful water that I've drank that ended up being pee and stuff like that. It's crazy. But yeah, you end up drinking some awful stuff. And that you end up having to drink. And a lot of times it ends up clogging your Sawyer. There's just too much stuff. If you're not, I mean, ideally you could pre-filter, but things like algae and stuff don't filter out quite as easily. So you end up like clogging to the point where you'd be spending, like 10 minutes trying to get a liter out. And at that point you're expending a lot of energy trying to squeeze water out. So I'd almost rather like carry the extra 3 ounces or whatever it is, I believe, to carry an extra Sawyer squeeze, and then just make sure that I have like a back flusher so that whenever I do get to town, I can back flush them both out. So I'm never relying on only one water filtration system, so that I can move a little bit faster through those really like hot, tough filtering areas.
That's amazing. It's funny. So I haven't really done too much desert hiking, but I did get out last April to Joshua Tree for like a couple days. Also hit San Jacinto, which I think is kind of pretty close to part of the PCT. But it was funny to me, especially coming from someone that's always grown up in the Northeast, that we were in an area that was basically the size of Rhode Island that has no water in it whatsoever. And we were out there day hiking, and it was maybe like 80s, and me and Ash, like, actually, I think we took 3 liters with us, and not a very strenuous hike, and we drank like almost all of it in probably 4 or 5 hours, just like probably a 12, 13, 14, maybe 15 even mile hike. But it was pretty wild. We crossed, I forget, there's a name of the trail that goes across the entire park. But we saw 2 backpackers, and I was like, out of curiosity, I'm like, how much water are y'all carrying? And they're like, oh, like 9 liters for like 3 overnights. And I was like, oh my God, like that's something that's so unheard of for if you were hiking in the Northeast. Like someone would probably look at you like you were crazy if you had 9 liters of water on you. Like, why are you doing that to yourself? But,
yeah. Well, let me tell you that my longest water carry for the Divide to Crest was 55 miles. And that was it was 100 plus the entire day, complete exposure the entire day. I was walking through salt flats and basins. I can't express to you how hot it was and how dry. And these like massive dust devils. They're essentially like tornadoes across this like expansive basin. That they're sort of like these huge giants like twirling around like tornadoes that you can see like 4 or 5 at any given time across this 50-mile span. So that was quite the long day, and I carried 10 liters for that. And 10 liters for 55 miles. I ended up finishing at 1:30 in the morning when I got into Wells, Nevada. And I had run out of water. I made it, and I was safe. And I took the proper precautions I needed to. I won't get into all of them, but I was okay.
Were you using any sort of like liquid IV or scratch or anything, or just straight up water pretty much?
Yeah, I'm pretty on top of my like electrolyte intake when I'm out there. It's just you just have to. I try to keep an electrolyte drink and a water going whenever I can, just so I can. I feel like, especially just because of the amount of time I spent in the desert, my ability to regulate my like electrolyte intake is really strong. Like I can feel it in my body when I need a sip of electrolytes. It's a very tangible feeling in my body when I'm out there. So it's something that I don't have to think about in milligrams. I can do on a feel basis, and trust myself.
That's pretty incredible. Like, talk about being comfortable in your own skin, like literally being able to know, kind of just, you're so experienced out there that you know what your body needs. Like that's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's like a little superpower.
You had mentioned that you did a lot of your hiking like out of the peak sun hours. Was that a stretch where you just had to because there was just nowhere to hide?
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. At a certain point, like you have to weigh out, like, people talk about the idea of like taking a siesta, right? But when you don't have guaranteed access to water for a long period of time, taking a siesta can actually be really dangerous. You're always sort of like weighing out how fast you think you can get through this really tough stretch versus how much water you're gonna lose just by sort of like sweating it out, even in the shade, just waiting there, not making any mileage, not getting any closer to water, right? So yeah, a lot of the like traditional wisdom that like people tell you about hiking in the desert, like when you have the ability to move quickly in the desert, you might do a different calculation than if you felt like you had to move pretty slowly and you're like I'm moving quickly out there, so I'm going to do a different calculus than other people might about what is risky and what is not. So to me, it was more risky to stay put and to wait for the night because I would still be going through water and getting more dehydrated just sitting there, huddled underneath the like only metal tank that I found. It was bone dry, no water in it, but it was the only shade I found. I saw shade 3 times in that 55-mile day.
Wow.
So yeah, so you got it. At a certain point, you have to keep going, right? Like it's not actually safe to sit and wait it out, which is what I think people would tell you.
That's brutal. Now, I imagine too, this is like, I know you did the Arizona. Would you say like the Arizona trail is really the thing that sort of first like prepared you to like sort of get comfortable with, I guess, that kind of risk tolerance of being able to like be like mentally and obviously physically is important too, but mentally be able to be like, okay, I've got 10 liters of water. I'm going to do this 55-mile day across a vast basin in 100+ degree heat, with literally watching sand tornadoes blow across, just kind of drilling home that it's incredibly dry and hot, like as if you don't already feel like a baked potato or something like that. You're like, oh, there's these convectional like tornadoes whipping up because it's literally so hot. But yeah, I'm fascinated by the comfortability level of being able to take on something like that.
Yeah, no, you're totally right when you said the thing about the Arizona trail. That's like the first sort of like real desert experience that I feel like I got. I mean, the PCT for sure like is sort of like a chaparral desert. Where I was a lot different than chaparral type for the most part. So yeah, there's different types of desert and different ways to survive when you're out there. So we're talking like dust and rock type desert and sagebrush desert. So yeah, I did get pretty comfortable out there on the Arizona trail. It's where I developed my love for the desert and the ability to listen to my body when I am in those situations where I'm getting dehydrated and where heat is the primary factor. And like we're trying to make sure you're not falling into that heat exhaustion level, right? Because that's when things start getting dangerous. You can slide into heat stroke, and that's when you're risking your life. So yeah, doing the Arizona trail was what sort of got me up, even interested in it, right? Like, and then I've done the southern bit of the Continental Divide Trail 3 years in a row now, which includes the Boot Heel, which is like a famously dry and exposed section. Yeah, I've just spent a lot of time in the desert in the last few years, including obviously like with the Hayduke as well. That was where I really stepped up my skills and my ability in water and risk and electrolyte management, all those things, sun management. So yeah, like over time, you don't just like jump right up to what I was doing, right? Like
Yeah.
you have to have all these things come intuitively to you. You can't be figuring that stuff out there when you're in the middle of a 55-mile day, right? Like that's not an option. You have to have everything so dialed in. You have to be able to listen to yourself so easily that you know when things turn from being, say, uncomfortable, comfortable, uncomfortable, danger zone, orange zone, okay, red zone, I got to do something different quickly, and you never really want to get into that red zone if you can help it. So yeah, I think that I like sort of worked my way up into like being able to take on something like that. And I do feel very comfortable taking those things on. Like I'm actually going to go back and hike the Arizona Trail this April with a friend of mine. And it's so like, it's going to be lovely to go back there now where I just feel like I have a skill set that's really, really sort of like equipped to handle something like that comfortably.
Cool. Now, I guess I know Paul mentioned, did you want to sort of ask what you had some interest in section of the trail you wanted to ask about, Paul, before I go?
It was the Basin Range Trail.
Okay.
There was some
Right.
really. I actually watched. It was like an hour-long documentary on
From
YouTube.
Eric Cohen.
Yeah. So there was a couple interesting things that had nothing to do with hiking, so to speak, but just kind of that area of the country that really like jumped out at me. It was kind of all a lot of little abandoned towns was pretty cool. But the one thing I have to keep reading my notes here. It might not have been anything exciting to look at, but the backstory was really cool about the nuclear shaft. Did you happen to stumble on that? It was called Project Faultless. And it was this nuclear shaft out in the middle of like nowhere, Nevada. The government dug down 3,300 feet and then dropped a nuclear bomb that was 67 times the size of what they dropped on Hiroshima into this shaft. And they said, at least as the documentary said, the ground dropped like 9 feet because of the explosion. So I was curious if you ran into that at all. Again, the story might be cooler than the actual object itself, but.
Well, I don't know. I didn't run into that, so I didn't do the entire Basin and Range Trail. That's like a loop trail that goes all around Nevada. I only used a portion of it to get across south to north across Nevada. But here's what I want to say about that trail and Eric, the creator. So I haven't met Eric in person. I saw the doc, super cool. And he's a great follow on Instagram because he lives out there. Like he's like an amateur miner. God, I wish I could think of his Instagram off the top of my head. Maybe I'll like send it to you. You can throw it in the show notes or something. But yeah, so he goes into all these abandoned mines and he pulls out the most amazing stuff, like all these gems and crazy stuff, like rocks I've never heard of and never seen before. And like he's like down there with like the helmet with the headlamp on it. Like that man is a mole down there in those mines. And so that's actually like something a point I want to talk about. So Eric with the Basin and Range Trail, and then there's also the Great Basin Trail as well. Do y'all know Ryan Silva, Dirtmonger? Have you heard of him?
No. Nope.
So they both are route creators, and they both created a route that happens to run very similarly, at least on the section that I was tracing, in Nevada. And so he had created the Great Basin Trail. Like I said, they run almost concurrently with Eric's trail for a while. And it was so cool to sort of like see the way that each of them handled the route creation differently, right? Like they weren't aware of each other's routes at the time. They were being created kind of like similarly around the same time, not at the exact same time, but they weren't aware. I don't believe that they were. So they handle all these like different choices differently as they're traversing the same mountain ranges. And then my job is to, as the third person, I have their GPX tracks. I know how they handled things, and then I choose how I am going to handle things. Sometimes it's the way that one of the other two was, and sometimes it's a third way that made sense to me, or that felt, like it'd be better for me with the information that I had. And so I had such an amazing experience where this past fall I presented on the Divide to Crest route at Alda West. They had a conference in Sacramento, and I presented on the route. And one of the other speakers was Ryan Silva, Dirtmonger, the creator of the Great Basin Trail. And I had the best time of my life getting to sit down with him and talk about his experience in the same exact areas and how he makes his choices and how he does route creation. He's somebody with so much more experience than me in these things. He's like light years ahead of where I am. And to get to talk to somebody who's doing such a specific thing that honestly so few people really have like interest in doing on their own, and to get to sit down with like somebody who's doing the work and that you're sort of like looking up to in that way. Like I had such a amazing time getting to ask him all my questions, and he was very generous and was sort of like, hey, like you're doing this too, this is like you're one of us and everything. But I don't know, I just like it's cool to get to meet people. Like I'm not really interested in meeting celebrities or anything like that. I'm interested in meeting people who do like incredible things that I have so much respect for, that I think are so such a beautiful way to use your life. And so that was really cool to speak with him. How many people get to hike a trail and then talk to the person who conceptualized their path through?
Yeah, and I mean now, and you are one of those people now. I mean, you've got your GPX track out there that people can look at and see. I don't want to get too into the weeds, but so when you're planning these things, like most topography maps are like usually 200-foot gradients. Like, is there sections that you ran into or like, oh shit, there's a 150-foot cliff here, or things like that where you had to improvise a little bit?
Dude, I love that question. That is so thoughtful of you. Okay, that's the thing when I talk about reading topographic maps in the desert, really reading topographic maps everywhere, right? Like you cannot bet on a topographic map, especially in the desert where things change so quickly, number one. And also rock formations, like the complexity of a rock formation is not captured in a topographic map, right? So something that looks super passable, or something that looks like, it could be less steep than a lot of mountains here in the White Mountains with the 48, right? But it could be completely impassable because of some cliff that you couldn't read on a topographic map that wouldn't really show up, right? Or some rock formation that essentially made it into like a drop off, or that made it so that you need technical climbing gear to pass it. So yeah, it's like the best laid plans, like it doesn't matter like how good your plan is and how much everything makes sense. But when you get there, the ground's gonna look different than what you think it's gonna look like. So you're always adjusting, you're always making like sort of game time decisions. And that for me is like, that's the excitement of it, man. That's the beauty of it, right? That's the adventure of it, is not having a guaranteed outcome or having a guaranteed like what's the next mile going to look like. I never knew what my day was going to look like, and I don't know, you can't buy that.
Excellent. You must be able to pick up on certain features though a little bit, I would think, now that you plan something that extensive, where you're maybe like, oh, this could be a sign of like something happening here, or like,
okay,
or is it still a wild card?
But not what you'd think. Okay, so the thing that I feel like I gained a lot of insight into is property boundaries and land management, because that is not made super clear on a lot of maps. There's I think if you're doing route creation, like a standard Gaia map, I found it to be out of date often. So, and there's also ranchers will change their own private boundaries and will fence off things that maybe on a map don't appear to be theirs, and maybe they aren't, but maybe they've just made this choice for their own cattle, for whatever, for their own reasons, right? But you're always sort of reading the land, trying to see who manages the land. Are you trespassing on someone's land? You don't want to be doing that if you can help it, right? And, and I don't want to draw, if anyone ever decides to hike the route after me, right? I don't want to be leading people into, some pissed off ranchers or miners' backyard, right? So, I found that I got a lot better at reading land through the lens of management and ownership, because that is so important, out there, property boundaries and who administrates what, has a big a big say in the way that we can recreate there.
Yeah, makes sense. Was there any sort of sticky situations like you ran into with it? And the funny thing is too, I think it's hard. It's even hard for me to visualize. I just haven't hiked out west that much. But it's like to me in New Hampshire, even I mean the Adirondack Park is big, but out there's just these swaths of land where there might not be anybody else really out there except ranchers or miners or whatever. But was there any situations where you kind of encountered that where you're like, oh, I need to go around, or there was a fence here that I can't get over, or like something to that effect?
Or might have been staring down the barrel of a shotgun.
Yeah, or something interesting like that. Like
no shotguns that were pointed at me. Ran into plenty of hunters out there who had guns, but no, all friendly ones. Okay, so there were definitely times where I ended up crossing mountain ranges that ended up being bought out by mines. So they were like private property. I made notes of all that. Like I kept notes of where I felt like I was like maybe on dubious footing. I would say that generally my experience has been that ranchers and miners are amenable to having hikers come through. They're more, when they're talking about their property rights, they're worried about ways that you'd be impacting their business. So if you're a rancher, right, you're not going to want somebody bringing their own cattle onto your land to then graze on that land. Do they care about a hiker who's just walking through on the dirt road that they've had there for, since their great grandfather, bought the land?
Yeah.
No, they're not going to care for the most part. And same thing goes for mines, right? Like, are you digging through their mines trying to pull out ore? Like, are you trying to like jump their claim? Or are you just walking through and you ended up on a mining road that you didn't necessarily expect yourself to be on? Generally, I found that the miners and ranchers will either pay you no mind, or they'll be friendly and inquisitive as to what the hell this purple-haired person is doing walking out in the middle of nowhere.
Like, we haven't seen anybody hiking up this mountain ever. Like, what's going on? What's going on
Oh,
here?
constantly. So I ran into in one of the most remote areas in the lower 48 is the area where Idaho, Oregon, and Nevada meet. There's like those three states come to a confluence, I guess. I don't know what a better word for it is. But that is a very like remote area full of sagebrush, just like never ending. Like, I can't tell you how never ending. It's beyond what you're thinking. Like, it's more than that. And so I'd be walking out there for, days. And so the only thing you see is my footprints and maybe some cattle footprints. And I had a couple hunters. They were scouting elk. They weren't even hunting. They were out scouting elk in a like ATV. And they came up behind me one day, like mid-morning, and they told me that they had been following my tracks for 10 miles. Because they saw footprints and they were like, this person's got to be in trouble, right? Like this, because there would be no reason that you would be walking out there otherwise. Like that's like culturally, that's the experience. Is that people aren't on foot generally because it's considered not safe. But those people ended up being great. I ended up staying with that hunter when I got to Plush, Oregon, where he lived, and so yeah, I made a connection there, and I was very happy. He and his son were the ones hunting, and they gave me some sandwiches out of their cooler, and we had a good chat for a while. So even out in the absolute middle of nowhere, running into those guys was quite a treat.
That's great.
I hadn't seen people in like days, and then it's these guys with like cold seltzer and ham and cheese for me.
It's so cool. So cool.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit of a tangent, but yeah, you just made me think of something. I think you spend so much time, in solitude and by yourself in these remote areas and such. And I think, as I read, when you reconnected with the PCT and all of these, not necessarily familiar faces, per se, but they're still, family at the end of the day, right? They're part of the greater trail family. And it sounded like you struggled a little bit with the dichotomy of, all right, you know what, it's great to be around people, but I kind of miss the solitude as well. Like, how'd you ultimately process that? Because that's something I think, even going back to, Nick was talking about it before, just some of the dynamics of the social dynamics of being on trail.
Absolutely. Yeah, that wasn't like an unexpected challenge that I ran into. I set that trail up where I started the trail on the CDT right around when the northbound bubble was heading out, and I was planning to end right around when the northbound bubble, the PCT, would be right around the same area. So in my head, I'm like, I'm setting this up myself up, so I'm going to be alone in the middle, and I know that. But at least I'm starting and finishing around community, around other hikers, like around other through hikers who we have the shared understanding. And that was something I was super excited for. And I'm super glad that I did do that. I think what I found was once I got back to the PCT after being out in the Oregon desert, like not seeing anyone for so long, I went through sort of like a grief period, I would say. I was so used to being like quote unquote by myself. I don't necessarily feel like I'm by myself when I'm in the outdoors like that, when I'm completely alone. Like that is like my connection, like to this planet and all the things around it, like that I'm out there talking to the animals. I'm talking to the plants. You know what I mean? Like that is how I interact with the outdoors, to be completely honest with you. So like, I feel like I'm with all those other things that are out there, all those other like, beings that are out there. So, that's my sort of like, my take on it is that I never feel lonely when I'm out there. There's too much life out there for me to feel too lonely. So then getting back into humanity and getting back like around that society, right? Like, there is something jarring about it at first, just like how hikers experience post-trail depression, right? Like it was sort of a version of that where I was reintegrating back into the community of thru hikers. And I was so happy that they were there. And I ran into some really cool people. I made some new friends when I was out there. Ultimately, it was a deeply positive experience. Like I said, I'm so glad that I structured it the way that I did. But I did have that like unexpected period of grief where it's a sort of like, okay, time to like plug back in. And so it was unexpected.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this is nowhere near the magnitude, but I definitely like to solo hike every now and then, and I kind of get the same vibe too. Where I feel like there's people that do solo hike, or again, what you're doing is a completely different scale than what I'm doing, going out doing maybe 15 miles by myself in the Adirondacks or something. But people will be like, oh, or like, it doesn't freak me out particularly. Like, there's definitely times where I've gotten in my own head where I think, but to me, it's also a muscle of learning maybe self-confidence and sort of self-reliance a little bit, where you are kind of like, you are by yourself. I've always got a Garmin InReach on me, so I'm not like completely just out to the wind or out to the breeze or whatever. But I think there's also things that you get to flesh out in your head that I wouldn't otherwise maybe have the ability to do. Not that I don't like being with my family and with friends and stuff like that. I certainly enjoy hiking with other people, but I do enjoy occasionally just doing my own thing and kind of being out there with your own thoughts. And like you said, it is kind of weird where it's like, I think if you stopped, I can only imagine like when you're in that section, you're really in the middle of nowhere. Like you're out there, but it must be sort of this sort of, I don't want to say divine, but it must be this really interesting feeling. Like also just knowing you're like, I'm with the elk and these animals in the sagebrush. And like, I'm just here in this like sort of moment in this thing that nobody else is here right now. It's just me. Like it must be sort of this thing of like appreciation, like I'm just here right now doing my thing. And then when you get around other people, you're like, they don't know what that's like, kind of like, I don't know.
I hope that they do, and if they don't, I hope that they get that experience as well. It's something that it's something that I need in my life, right? And that's like, I structure my life where I'm sort of like, I'm on trail for big chunks of the year. Ideally, I'm spending a portion of it by myself at the very least. Quote unquote by myself, like I said. But I like to be plugged in communities. I'm a very social person in many ways. And then I also like deeply need to be by myself or be the only human out there. And I also like really, that's a gift that I got through sobriety. Like it's super fair to say, right? Like I didn't enjoy the company of myself. I didn't like being in my own head. It was like a haunted house up there when I was in active addiction and not living as my authentic self, right? Like I am so grateful that now I like who I am. I love who I am, and getting to be that, like in connection with nature in that way. I couldn't imagine a better life. So
super cool. All said. Well, we do want to be I could literally sit here and probably talk to you just about route making for probably hours. But any other questions you had, Paul? I think I got out everything that I had.
I had one, and apologies because I'm going to read this directly from my notes because I don't want to mess it up. So we are talking. So you did the AT in 2021, and you had your list of fears heading into that trip, and these were listed in decreasing intensity. Number one was transphobia from folks in town, especially from the South.
Yeah.
2 was injury. 3 was ticks and Lyme disease. 3 was lack of trans competence. That was 4. 5 was running out of money, and 6 was staying sober. So I'd be curious, kind of fast forwarding today, we're 4 years later. Would you rank that list the same way?
It's wow. I haven't heard that in so long. I feel like I'm hearing that for the first time. Okay. So decreasing intensity, meaning that like the top of the list is what I was most afraid of, right?
Yeah, that's how you had it listed. Yeah.
Okay. I would say I view it a lot differently now. I really do. Like the unknown is scary, and being around people who you're not sure if they're like gonna be nice to you or not is something that like we all have as a fear, whatever, like regardless of your gender identity or sexuality, right? We all have that fear as humans. I have found in my experience that people everywhere I go are kind and want to be good and respectful. Sure, there's like differences in like knowledge or awareness or whatever. And obviously, people have different political beliefs, but I have found that in a one-on-one conversation, when you are faced with another human being, people tend to want to treat you like a human being and treat you with basic respect. That's been my experience. I also think that I carry myself in a way, I hope, that, like you sort of tell people how to treat you, right? Like, I think that your like things like body language and the way that you feel about yourself is then how other people will feel about you. So if I'm saying, hey, I'm a safe person, I feel comfortable being where I am right now. I know that I don't expect that you're going to be mean or be like rude to me or anything like that. I believe that then makes it easier. It makes it more likely that those people will also be kind and respectful and, like honor my identity as well, as best as they're able, honestly. And, like I say all that regardless of politics, of course, like there's different like gaps and stuff, and that's a completely different discussion. But as far as in-person interactions, I have found people to be deeply kind everywhere I've gone. So I don't feel that same fear anymore. And I've been in the most quote unquote conservative places in the country for sure. I would also say like I'm white, so I can't speak to what it would be like to be a non-white person in those areas and having those same experiences. So I can only speak from my set of identity. And so that was my experience. So injuries, running out of money, stuff like that. I'm afraid of injury now. Not Lyme disease, not afraid of Lyme disease anymore. I carry Doxy though. I carried Doxy in my first aid kit. So that if I ever got it, I'd be able to treat it. Before I even got to a doctor, I'd be able to pre-treat. I have that like prescribed by a doctor. And then I think really my like fear right now is injury. Like as I like lead into these like, whatever the future holds for me project wise, I just don't want to have like that injury, like that, like where people of a certain age at a certain point, you're kind of afraid you're going to like blow the knee out and now you can't play rec basketball anymore. Like I'm turning 38 in a couple of weeks and, I'm not saying that's old, but I'm just saying, my body is something that I have to take good care of at this point. It's something that I'm concerned about. And, I think that my experience and like the strength and strengths I've built up in places like my tendons, like your muscles and your tendons do remember the hiking that you've done prior to that. So all the hiking that you do makes you stronger every season you come back, even if your muscles have depleted over the winter or whatever it is. You're never starting from zero like you were that first time. So I don't have like that type of fear, but I am careful about how I build up my training now, where I would have sort of like a little bit more haphazard with it my first year or two.
And what are you working on, sort of, for not to derail the car? Well, like, it's on the same tangent.
No,
So
that's fine. Yeah.
I'm just gonna keep going with it. But what do you do to sort of train for these things? Like, how do you ramp up sort of before you're leaving for these things? Or you just sort of imagining being in North Woodstock, you kind of have the ability to sort of get up and be like, oh, I might bang out like Moosalok tonight or something like that.
Yeah, the best thing you can do is live in the mountains if you want to make your life about hiking. That's the way to do it. So that's for sure the way to start, is that I have access to hiking year round, and I do. I'm a winter hiker for sure. I have a project that I'm not going to be able to talk about quite yet publicly, but my like plan right now, I'll tell you, like for training, right, is that I'll be going out onto the Arizona Trail in April. And that will be a way to sort of get some like bulk mileage under my belt, just to get the through hiking muscles back, get the trail legs back to where I want them to be. And then I'm going to be doing some sort of more like elevation based hiking in the Whites to build up that muscle strength, and work on some longer distance days for some projects that I have, in the works for this season.
Cool. Well, I think I speak for, I mean, obviously me and Paul, but even everybody that's following you, can't wait to see like what you're up to next. Keep crushing it. Keep telling your story. Like I said, I need to look up a thesaurus or something, get it here for what I have guests on, so I can find other adjectives, but inspirational, like, really just keeps coming to mind. Hiking and otherwise, your whole gender transition, sobriety. It's awesome. And yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing your story and for spending some time with us tonight. It's really cool.
Super cool chatting with you guys. I appreciate you inviting me on.
Of course.
Yeah, and just speaking of story, you've got something coming up at the Notch later this month.
Oh yeah, right. Yes, thank you for the prompt there. So I am speaking at the Notch Hostel in North Woodstock, New Hampshire on March 29th. It's a Saturday night. I think it starts at like 7:00 or something like that. If you want to hear like an in-depth presentation about the Divide to Crest route, including all that route creation stuff, what the maps look like, and then going through a bunch of the highlights and sort of like crazy stories, which we didn't even really get to begin to touch on all that, because you could do a whole thing just on that, which I do. So come to the presentation on March 29th. I'm hoping at that presentation that I'll also be at a point where I'm able to share what my plans are for the year with the people who are at that presentation. So get a peek into what you can expect from me this coming year. But otherwise, I mean, the way that you can support me, if you can't make it to the presentation, just follow along with me on Instagram. My username is it's Seltzer Skelter, seltzer like the drink, and Skelter like Helter Skelter. Thanks. Yeah, I love that. I came up with that when I got sober. So I'm drinking a lot of seltzer.
Yeah. I have some seltzer right here right now. I've got a little spin drift set up. That's my podcast.
The best. Can't go wrong with it.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, cool. Thank you again. And we look forward to seeing what you got up your sleeve and what you're going to be doing for the future, because I'm sure it'll be crazy and awesome. So
heck yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Okay, Paul. We talked a little bit ahead of time, and I think both of us agreed, because of the proximity that we've been recording these podcasts. It's been less than a week since the last one we did. Actually, it's been like 5 days or 6 days technically. Now, we didn't have a ton of media stuff to talk about, I don't think. I know you were still watching 0 Hour with Robert De Niro, and to be honest, I've just been bored. Ash, I think, finally got to the season finale of Love Is Blind, and now it's at the point like she doesn't even watch it yet. She just fast forwards and then just sees like the decisions of like whether they're going to marry each other. So it's like, I'm like, can we at least watch, like, if I'm here and I'm going to be subjected to this, can we at least watch it without fast forwarding? And it was funny too, because she like narrates, she's like, oh my God, I love you, like as she's fast forwarding the moments, which I thought was hysterical. She's very funny sometimes. You're very funny frequently, Ash, I should say. I think people don't realize how funny you actually are sometimes. Just shouting out my best friend and partner here. But anyways, yeah, I haven't caught much. But Paul, so we've been doing hypotheticals, and it's kind of funny because I think we've got like one left that we're probably gonna bring back for sort of something coming up in the future. But we're running dry on the hypotheticals. So Paul, being the the great researcher that he is, as you could tell by his research and ahead of time preparation he did with Lyla. He kind of did a little research. I don't know if you happened to just see this, but he had an idea for sort of this little game ranking kind of deal that you saw, and I thought it'd be cool to try it on the podcast.
Yeah, 100%. So, the idea like came from my son. So
Cool.
he's a big like NBA basketball fan, and so there's a couple Instagram pages that he follows, and every once in a while he'll shoot me a story or something. So it gave me an idea, and this is to do a blind ranking. Nick and I have not pre-scripted this. He doesn't know what I'm going to ask him, but I'm going to ask him a question. I'm going to give him one by one 5 options, and he's got to rank them sight unseen. Now, I will say, Nick, I did not throw any like really bad choices in here, at least in my opinion.
And is which in the ranking, is it 5 is the best or one?
Number one would be best.
First.
Number
Okay.
one would be best.
Just checking. Okay. I'm writing it down on my notepad here.
So because it's fresh with your winter finish, the question is rank these top 5 favorite winter hikes.
Okay.
Out of the 48.
Okay.
So we're going to go one by one, and you got to like blind place these.
Okay.
All right. So the first one is isolation. And so give me a little like reasoning too, and like why you're placing it. You know, if you throw it at 2, like why is it at 2 and such?
Yeah, it's not gonna be at 2. As much as I love hiking with you in Deanna, it's not at 2. I'm sorry. Let's see. I'm gonna go cautiously at 4 because I'm giving myself a buffer because it's not like it was the worst hike, but I think depending where you're going, I want to leave myself some room. Maybe that'll be a poor decision, but I think I'm putting it there because isolation. The day we did it was a great day. I had a fun time hiking, but as far as like some of the other days I've had above tree line this year, we had some good views. It was cold as hell at the summit. We couldn't really hang out that much. It's not like I'm learning too. I think in winter, sometimes you just don't get those moments to like sit down and chill out and like enjoy the summit for half an hour or whatever, which is fine. Breaking through the Engine Hill bushwhack was fairly exhausting. And honestly, why it's going to rank this low, the first and foremost is, and everybody can attest to that went between Steve, you, and Deanna, Mike, the drive up, that whether it was the night before or the morning of, the drive up was the worst snow I had driven in, and I'm knocking on wood because it's just still snowing, even though we're into spring now. We're going to be into shortly, but that was the worst snowstorm and worst snow I've driven up in all year. It was like sketchiest. Like I have an all-wheel drive WRX, and I was not going that fast from probably north of Boston until we got to the trailhead. And you guys were all like, "Oh man, Nick, you like flew up there or whatever into the parking lot." I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't want to get stuck in like the 8 inches of fresh snow on top of this parking lot. I just want to make it here." And like, I think I was joking. I'm like, I think my heart rate was higher like driving to the trailhead than it probably was when we were actually hiking on trail. It was slightly nerve wracking, but that's all those factors, mostly the drive, putting it at number 4.
All right, isolation at number 4. I love it. All right, the next one is Carrigain.
Carrigain, I would have put that at 3. Had an early wake up for that one, and was fortunate enough to be joined by Susie and Kate, who I hadn't hiked with before. I guess Kate technically I hiked with a little bit when I did Jefferson, Washington, but had a really beautiful morning for that one, even though it was quite cold. And that one had fantastic views. I broke off by myself. I think right before we got to Signal Ridge, great views. Actually got to the summit by myself for probably like 5 or 10 minutes. I crossed the hiking buddies group and passed them. Got some outstanding photos that day. And that was one of those temperature inversion days. So it was actually, I would guess, like in the high 20s or something on Carrigain. And actually at the trailhead when we started, it was 0. And when I finished at the trailhead, it was like 20 or 18 or something like that. So kind of wild if you ever experienced one of those. I know you were out, I think, that day too.
Yeah, I was on Pierce the same day.
It was a really wild thing when that happens, and I believe it just has to do with how warmer air starts to work in from like a low pressure, and it traps the cold air in the valleys. So it's kind of a cool thing to experience if you've never got it. It's like getting a taste of spring really briefly, and then plunging back into winter. But But that was a really fun day. Long but fun.
All right. So we get Kerrigan at 3.
Okay.
Isolation at 4. So you got 1,
Yeah.
2, and 5.
I'm wondering if I should have buffered these higher now. I don't know. I feel like something's gonna come here. You're gonna strike some nerve. That was a crazy hike.
All right. So the next one is South Twin.
So I don't know if this is. So I sent you a picture of South Twin from the day I did this, but
Yeah.
it's tough not to put that one. I don't know if I want to put it at 1, but I really lucked out the day I did the Twins. I think that was January 23. Granted, I didn't realize I'd be in the dark thinking about it stupidly because of daylight that time of year, but I think I hiked in the dark. I almost hit sunrise on North Twin. If I had left like 10 minutes earlier, I probably would have hit it. But super cold, clear, dry day. I think I was describing to you, like, the temperature I don't think was above 0 at elevation like all day, but there was no wind and it was super clear and dry. And you could see, like, I remember you could see Jay Peak in Vermont. You could see Mount Mansfield off of North Twin. Got one of the best views I've gotten to date on South Twin that morning. Had it to myself also for like 30 minutes before anybody got there. Having get up there that early, and the only guy I crossed, who was actually coming from Galehead, was a gritter, and chatted with him, and I believe his name was also Nick. I forget his last name, but he was super cool. But I'm gonna put that at. It's tough not to put that at 1. I don't know. That was one of those, and I don't know. It was also one of the first times I had done like a solo winter hike that long. And kind of, again, like you can get in your own head on trail, and I definitely got in my own head. And then once I saw views, I was like, okay, this is cool. Like I'm good. I'm good today. I'm gonna go put that at number 1. I think
Number 1.
We'll see what comes, but I really liked that day, and I don't know. It was just lucky. It's the best time I've had in the Twins too, I think, ever. So
that's great. That's great. All right, the next one is the big boy, the rock pile.
The rock pile. I like how this is breaking out. Washington is going to have to go at 2, the way I got this already going. I did Jefferson, Washington the same day. Did him with Mike Trokey, and actually crossed Kate and Fawn on the way up. And we went up Jewel, cut across Gulf Side, back over to Jefferson, and then made our way back up over to Washington and then back down Jewel. And another really, I actually remember being so warm that I was like ready to almost take my shirt off. And then I'm like, I'm probably going to get so sunburned if I do that. But it was that warm hiking across the snowfields. That was like probably mid to late March last year. And not very bad winds, really clear views. You actually could see Mount Marcy from Washington, which I kind of remember was cool. I had my Peak Visor app. Again, it was just kind of unusual when it's that warm. Usually it tends to get more humid and you don't have visibility that good. But and it was a fun day. Yeah, and it was just a fun day with Trokey too. Like we were chatting it up and really enjoying it. It was a long. The only thing that did suck on the way down is we lost where we had crossed the river from the Cog on the way up, where Fawn had kind of showed us and actually I think they might have even made an actual trail there now. Like over the past year, I feel like I saw a post from the Cog or something. But because of how the snow melted and drifted, we couldn't see our footprints. I'm forgetting whether it melted or drifted. It might have melted. But on the way back, we ended up actually going to where the trail went, and we both were like so over it, like we're like, just screw it, we're gonna walk through the water. And it was incredibly cold, like probably like ankle to knee deep. And yeah, that was a little regrettable because I think my feet went numb, like walking back the last quarter mile or whatever to the car. But that was a great day, great views. I always think it's funny when you're up on Washington, and I've read a lot of the books and stuff, Not Without Peril and different tragedies you hear about, but on the nicest days up there, it is one of the most beautiful places, I think, to be in the Northeast. And you kind of forget about all the shroud of danger that is around that mountain.
Right. I'm actually just starting Not Without Peril, so it's I'm just a little bit into it. I'm looking forward to making some serious progress on it.
That one I hopped around a little bit too, to be honest, with the stories, because it gets kind of like dry a little bit, in my opinion. It's also just kind of, you're just reading back-to-back tragic stories of people pretty much dying in the presidential range. So, and I'm not trying, I'm making dark humor joke here, but that is generally, it's an educational book, but that is generally what it's about. A lot of history in there on, of course, all these accounts, and I'm not trying to make light of people losing their lives, but it is a little bit. It's not like reading a coffee table book with pictures and descriptions in it. It's kind of, you got to kind of be in a mood to plow through that one. And it's not like reading anything Ty Gagney's written. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, but all right. Last but not least.
Yeah, what I get left with here.
All right, so you got South Twin at 1, Washington at 2, Kerrigan at 3, Isolation at 4. And without further ado, and very apropos, is the Bonds. So
I feel badly. I mean, honestly, in terms of difficulty, though, like, yeah, the Bonds were, I think, the day that I got dealt with this one, and we just talked about it on the episode before this. But yeah, it was a day. I think too, it's funny, like, being removed from it a few weeks. Like, I'm still like, yeah, it was tough, and I did. There's something too I didn't get into a lot on the other episode, but that night, so Rylan had been sick previously. And that night into Sunday, when I got home, I had a fever and stuff. So I absolutely was also sick hiking the Bonds, or coming down with something, which didn't help the experience. That being said, I still think it was the most kick-ass hike that I was dealt in all the first winter ascents. And falling in a spruce trap up to my face was something I won't ever forget, and I hope it doesn't happen again anytime soon. Certainly solo. I know it happens, but yeah, that was the thing. There's definitely a moment where I was like, I don't know if this is going to get done today, but again, thanks to everybody that came out, and we got it done. So
yeah, not that I'm letting you change anything, but you happy with the list, how it played out?
I don't know. I almost, part of me though is also like, should the Bonds be number 1, just because it was also like almost full condition day going back across Bond Cliff, like it was. Yeah. I think in terms of just like, in the fact that it was my finishing sort of peaks. Yeah, I don't know. You could almost swap those. I guess it depends on what you're looking at. That's, yeah, I'd say,
like, yeah. If I gave you the Bonds as the first one instead of Isolation, or put it earlier in the list, do you think you would have?
Yeah, I would have put
number 1 from a nostalgia perspective.
Yeah, I probably would have put it at 1 or 2. I would say, yeah. The Twins is like the polar opposite of the day I did the Bonds, like basically polar opposite.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that was fun. So I'll have to come up with one for you next week now. Having known what you've done hiking wise, or maybe I'll just go like a wild card and find some other ranking or something. But
I got another one teed up for you for next week. If you want to give it a couple weeks. Weeks down.
Okay, cool. That sounds good. Maybe we can go back and forth. This was cool. I like this. It gives an opportunity to sort of dive into some of this stuff too.
Yeah, especially with your 48. I mean, how long? I don't know the answer to this. So, how long did it take you to do the winter 48?
So I think if I looked at if I recall correctly, it was around 2018. I think winter. I think we did Wombeck first in the winter of 2018. Which really was one of our first winter hikes we ever did. I think Hale was probably the next one after that, where Ash famously like pulled her groin somehow coming down Hale and was like miserable on the way out. And I realized that I forgot, I replaced my bottle of ibuprofen because it was expired, but I forgot to put it back in my backpack, so she didn't have anything, and muscled it out, which was kind of miserable. And she's like, "Oh, I can ask the snowmobile for a ride back," and I'm like, "We can't do that. It doesn't count. So unless you want to go out to Hale again." But yeah, I believe it was like 2018 to basically this year, so something like 7 years. I probably cranked out I think I was at like 22 or something last winter, so like probably did almost half of them pretty much within the last year.
Yeah, and I didn't know where some of these fell. Like, I didn't know how long ago you did Washington, so like I knew when you did Kerrigan. Obviously, we did Isolation together, and and you just cranked out the Bonds to finish. So. I thought it might be a good opportunity to have you revisit some of the glory days.
Yeah, that's cool. I think we did Wombeck Hale pretty early, like I think a lot of people do. But yeah, in terms of like those ones, the Twins were like I think January 23. I did those, so that's probably the oldest. And then pretty much Washington was last year, and then Kerrigan, Isolation, and the Bonds were all this year. So.
Yeah,
I left myself.
I didn't want to submarine you and give you like Owl's Head, and
Owl's Head wasn't bad, other than when I actually did. That's the only time I've actually hiked with Gingerbeard Keen and met him. But I think actually the only time. But I actually that was the one that I managed to whack myself in the face with micro spikes when I tried.
Oh, that day.
And that's why you always secure your micro spikes on your pack with 2 carabiners, not 1, so they don't slingshot, because it'll happen.
Ouch.
Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, I think this is a successful episode, Paul. I think maybe we'll think about upgrading you from intern. I don't know if we have on the payroll yet to put you on a.
Well, it's free. It's on the free intern, so maybe. We don't intern.
Yeah, I don't think we do that here. I'll put in a word with upper management to see what they think, to see if we can we have room on the books. But yeah, nice job. This has been awesome.
This was great, and the conversation with Lyla was really fascinating. Oh,
amazing! Yeah, like I said, I really feel like I needed a source, because I just go to like fantastic, inspirational, amazing, like kind of cool, awesome, super cool. Like that's what I go to. Can work on that for the future, but yeah, it was a great conversation. Cool. So yeah, if you want to find us on the socials, you can. We're at PUDs Podcast. You can follow what we're up to, see some photos from the posts, see all the things in the stories that I like to share frequently, like things like the avalanche that evidently the Wildcat cam captured in Tuckerman Ravine that happened like yesterday. You can also find us on YouTube, also under PUDs Podcast, if you want to see our beautiful faces. You can see Paul and the eye candy that he is over on YouTube and get to experiences that way. We've got stickers. If you want to contact us on the socials, just shoot us your address and your name, and we'll get you out some fresh stickers. And I'm trying to think if I missed anything else. I think that was it, right, Paul? Anything else you can think of?
I think you nailed it.
Yeah, like, subscribe, review. Yeah. So until next time, bye, everybody.
Bye.
PUDs Podcast was produced and recorded in Black Cat Studios by the Pud Boys. Find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed, please consider leaving us a review and subscribing. Find us on social media, and we'll see you next time.